Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch by interviewing authors, discussing their books, learning about the writing process, and even, on occasion, chatting live with a panel of authors to discuss topics relevant to both readers and writers. My guest today on the Online for Authors podcast is Patti Meredith, author of the book South of Heaven. Patti's debut novel came out late in life, and for her, that's right on time. She could not be happier. In my book review, I stated South of Heaven is a contemporary family fiction that is filled to the brim with amazing characters, as well as a delightful and thought-provoking storyline. In fact, if you have a family, and we all do, you'll relate to miscommunications, slights, white lies, bold-faced lies, and reinventions of the past that often occur between those we love. Fern made a poor choice when she was barely accountable for such things and has lived with the consequences every single day since. Except for her son, her aunt, and one friend, she has kept to herself, hoping to somehow atone for her sins. Her sister Leona, on the other hand, seems to have it all, moving beyond their rotten childhood. But what happens when truth, old and new, becomes headline news? I love this story because it is one of redemption and love. We all make mistakes. We all try to cover those mistakes up, usually with disastrous results. We all find a way to love family despite it all. This is a wonderful novel, and I highly recommend it. Today on Online for Authors, I'm chatting with Patti Meredith, author of South of Heaven. Welcome, Patti.
Hello, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm super excited to have you. But before we get into the book and all the ins and outs and what made you write it, why don't you give listeners just a quick elevator speech? What is this book about?
Oh, golly. It's a book about sisters and family and how, little secrets or big secrets that you can't keep them. They're going to come out.
and then what happens when they do, right?
What happens when they do. It's also about the things we carry with us from early days, the mistakes we make and how we hold on to those, and we have shame and just normal stuff, normal things.
Right. So I have a question for you, just because of how I do things, and I'm wondering if it's how you do them. Do you write with a genre in mind, or do you just have a story and you write the story?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I only have one gear. I think I wish I could write other genres, but I think that I just have the one gear in that. Even my short stories tend to be, family, about people, about the problems we cause ourselves.
Right.
And so and of course everything is set in the South, so there's that genre. I've lived all over the South. I grew up in Virginia. I was born in North Carolina. Then I've lived in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Columbia, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee. My husband's job took us everywhere. So it's really hard not to kind of stay in the
South.
South.
The South, right?
Right what you know. It's funny because I love to read books that are. I've finally realized I'm really drawn to books that are set in the Northeast, and I don't know what that is, but
it's probably just a longing for something you don't know.
It's longing for cool weather.
Yeah, the heat's been pretty brutal, hasn't it?
So I stick to one genre.
So this genre that you say you stick to, do they call it? So I mean, I know it's like it is Southern fiction. You can do Southern fiction.
Yeah.
What other genres do you actually put it in when you're going through your list on Amazon? What do you call it?
Southern fiction. This isn't a genre on Amazon, but I was calling it chick lit for women of a certain age.
Okay. I love that. And you know what's great is I've talked with other authors who say,
Yeah.
yeah, there isn't really a genre for me. Mine is kind of like, I had one who told me mine is badass international women. And I
There
just,
you go. I mean, I feel that way about your books. I mean, there's historical, but they're so
but they're
relevant.
not. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love the historical part and I learned from that. But what I really love is your characters and their interactions and their the people that you have.
Right. So I tell people that I write character-driven fiction.
Yes,
And I think
yes.
that's what you do too. And you write character-driven fiction that happens to be set in the South. And
Right.
mine so far has been character-driven fiction that happens to be set in the past. But it
But
could be
everywhere.
anywhere.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you did that. I mean, yeah. So it is interesting though
Yeah.
how we come into it and what
Right.
what you don't even think about that's coming from you, and you think it's coming from other places.
Yeah. No, and so yeah, I tell people that I have like two parts of my brain, and there's the part that gets me through everyday life, and then there's the part that writes. And the part that writes doesn't talk to the part that gets me through everyday life. And so I'm constantly surprised. I'll go to write something and it's like, where did that come from? Because it feels like it came from outer space. And it just came from that creative side that doesn't get an outlet very often. And it's sitting over there just waiting, you know.
There's a lot of mystery to it, and it does
Yeah,
make you believe in a higher source.
you're not kidding.
It makes you believe in a higher power, or not that I never didn't believe that, but just it reinforces that because it's like there's no other way to explain the mystery
Explain
of
where it came from, right?
it.
So are you a plotter or a pantser?
I feel like that my characters are going to make a plot. You know, they can't help themselves. They're just,
But when you sit down to get started, though, do you already know where your story's going?
I kind of know a little conflict. I kind of know what that is. I kind of if it's an internal conflict, like a story I'm working on now, is about a man who, he was just trying to. He is just trying to do his best. He's just trying to get through life and keep things simple. And life is just not going to allow that to happen. So I think the characters bring on the plot.
Yeah.
They're the obstacles that they face, and everybody faces those. I have another story I'm working on with a widow, an elderly widow who just can't let go of something her husband did in the past. Even though he's deceased, she just can't let go of it. And that's internal,
Right.
So,
Right.
so the plots just kind of, like I said, they just come from the
So
crazy
so I
people.
think you're a little bit of a pantser. So you have an idea sort of, but I've tried to plot things out before I get writing, where I
Yeah,
have it all listed. And then my characters literally line up against the wall with their arms folded and say, when you're ready to write our story, let us know.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
they won't play. They refuse to play
Right.
until I do. Yeah.
And that's a
So
big sign that you need to go, okay, I'm sorry. What were you
I
saying?
I know. It's like, okay, let's get back to it. In my latest that I wrote, Daughters of Green Mountain Gap,
Yes.
there was a chapter that I didn't like what I had decided needed to happen. And so I didn't write it. And I thought, I'm going to make something else happen instead. And I tried for 6 weeks to come up with something else.
Which character was that?
This was the big crux of the point
Okay.
where
Okay.
I can't I'll ruin the whole book. But anyway, I didn't want it to happen. And so
Oh,
I just said, okay, I'm not going to write it. I'll come up with something else. But I also didn't know how my book was going to end. I couldn't figure out how
yeah.
anything was going to wrap up. I almost gave up on the story. Then I
Oh,
decided, okay, just write the chapter, the one that you don't want to write, and you can throw it away. You don't have to keep it.
right. Right.
And
That's the greatest thing you can
I
tell.
wrote it, I went to sleep. When I woke up, the rest of the book opened up. I knew exactly where it was going to go and how it was going to end. And I swear to you, Maggie, the main character, says to me in my head, if you'd written the chapter 6 weeks ago, we would have been 6 weeks ahead of where we are now.
Yes. Yeah.
And
That
I
is
was like,
so
I'm sorry.
No, but it's like I was just thinking while you were talking about that reading your book, reading The Daughters of Green Mountain, it's like you don't know what's going to happen either. I mean, as a reader, I mean, and so that's very interesting
It
because
is
maybe
just
if you knew, you would drop too many hints or
hints.
something, and it would be like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, well, I knew that was going to happen. But that's something to really think about.
Yeah. I don't know. It's my characters, they only let me in on what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And if I won't write it, then they're like, okay, you just let us know when you're ready and we'll get back to it with you. It's a crazy process in
We
my
can
head.
count on them to
So
tell us the truth, though, can't we?
it's true. So in this particular story, we have two sisters.
Yeah,
They're somewhat estranged.
yeah,
Not, I mean, they still see one another, but it's not pretty.
right.
And they see each other as, however they see each other. Why did you choose this conflict?
I think it was, I knew they were very different. And okay, first of all, disclaimer here. My sister always says, tell people I am not Leona.
Okay.
My sister is not
Not
Leona.
Leona. Okay.
But I think just seeing families and I love sisters are wonderful. My grandmother was there were 14 children in her family, and I think only two boys. And then my mother had a sister, and they were so close. They would bicker on the phone, but there was nobody that mom would rather spend time with than her sister.
Yeah.
And and then my sister is the greatest. It's like I can't imagine life without my sister. And so, but I've seen other families where things happen, and it's like there's no greater love, and there's no one that can push your buttons like your sister. Oh, I read this thing the other day on the internet. It was like when people can know your triggers, oh, they're triggering you. They invented the triggers. They
your sister figured it out, invented it, put it up there. Yeah, that's true.
So
That
I
is
just
true.
think that close relationship, and I think it's interesting when when they have different lives, and there's such totally different lives, but there's always that little grain of family that keeps you
That
there.
keeps pulling you back.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, do you think all families have secrets the way this family did?
I do think that. I really do. The older I get and the more you find out, like, oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Um, Yes, and maybe not as much. I don't know. Maybe it's not as much anymore because we live in a more open-minded society.
But I
And
think even then people still,
yeah, they do.
you
You're
know what,
right.
it's like it may be okay in society, whatever that thing is,
Right,
but in
right.
their own mind, it's not okay for them. Like it's okay for society at large, but not for me.
Okay, that's true. That's
You know?
very true. But I do think they do. And it's
Yeah.
interesting getting together with my high school friends sometimes and going, we didn't even know. Did you know, thinking
Right.
about what we missed growing up.
Right.
And maybe we'll be at the nursing home doing that too about these days. I don't
I
know.
think so. And I know that when we get together as a family for Christmas and my kids tell stories about things that they did growing up, and I'm like, wait a minute, I was your mother.
Where was I?
I
Yeah.
was your mother. And I didn't see any of it. And they just laugh. They think this is so funny. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Too much information.
too
Too much
much. Yeah. It's like,
information.
wait a minute. Let me go back and pretend everything was beautiful. So
Well, that's another thing. That was the thing about Leona, the one sister. It
yeah.
was like writing, she was the hardest character for me to write because Leona wanted to be a stereotype.
Yeah.
She wanted everyone to think everything was perfect. And she worked very hard to maintain that. And so I couldn't really, I couldn't get into, it was, she wasn't giving me much. And then when the history started coming together about they had the sisters' parents were both alcoholics, and it was a very bad, tragic growing up. And I realized that Leona was the one who held family together, her sister and her brother, and she was responsible at a very young age.
Yep.
And then I found forgiveness for her being such a snob, you know. It was
Yeah,
like,
because what she was doing her
yes,
best. She was trying to show the world that we're all okay, everything's
yes,
okay. Nothing to see here. There's
nothing to
nothing to
see
see
here,
here, right?
nothing to see here. And all she wanted was all she wanted out of life was a family. She just
Yeah.
wanted a good family.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's secrets.
Yeah. No, I agree.
On a
Um, yeah,
tangent.
do you think families can survive secrets?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. I I think families can survive anything. I mean, if they will,
If they want to.
if they want to, if they
Yeah.
will, if they remember what's important and don't get caught up in the little. And now, by everything, I don't mean like domestic violence and terror, you know,
Right.
that's
But those small
absolutely,
little secrets, those
yeah,
things that
yeah,
we're hiding and
right.
wouldn't bring up at the Christmas dinner table.
Yeah, and some
Yeah.
secrets, the worst secrets need to be brought out, and then it's like, "See you later," you know?
Yes.
So, anyway, I don't know.
Yeah. So one of your characters isn't really a character as much as an animal, and it's an emu. So
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about why
wow,
you brought emus into this story.
that's really a good question. Just I guess I did it just so I could, like, put him on the
Put
cover.
them on your cover.
No, I my character, Dean, Fern's son, is young, and he has some issues. He's not he's, he struggles. And he's in his 20s and he really wants to be his own boss. He wants to prove himself. And I don't know if you remember back in those days, it was like what in the 70s or something. I mean, the emu were supposedly going to be the
Oh,
next.
it was the next big
Yeah,
thing. Everybody was going to have an emu
right.
farm,
Everybody
right?
was going to have an emu farm, and it was going to take over everything, you
Well, it
know,
was going to take over egg production and meat
right?
production
Meat,
and yeah.
and it was healthier and it was da 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 da. And so Dean caught on to this and really believed it and went for it. And I said the 70s, that there's the 70s in the book, but this was in the 90s. And it was kind of when Dean decided he wanted to get into it, it was kind of that time where it was kind of going
On the
down.
down slope, right?
So unfortunately, he meets a man who has emu who is just trying to unload emu. And I also tell people that no emu are harmed in this book. I'm one of those people. If something happens to an animal, I'm out. So you can trust me to know that no emu are harmed. But that's just to. I think they kind of represent hope. Dean had this hope, and that whole emu thing was about discovering and hope, and maybe this will be the next big thing. I don't know. So
I
yeah.
know. I just loved it. You have it set in Carthage, North Carolina,
Yeah.
which is actually how we met
Yes.
over learning this because I have a daughter who lives in Carthage, North Carolina, and a mother who lives in Southern Pines, and a brother who lives in West End. And yeah, it's like lots of family. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is it. So while reading it and the emu farms, I even knew where I could find emu in Moore
Wow.
County, right? Like
Wow.
in my mind, I'm thinking you could go here to see an emu and you could go here to see an emu.
Oh,
I loved that. And you did a great job at the courthouse where he was sitting on the bench in the courthouse. And it
yeah.
was like, oh, I know where
You
we
know
are.
that courthouse. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought that was really good. You did a great job with the setting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, let's see. So the sisters are so different. We've got Leona, she looks perfect,
Right.
right? She looks perfect to the
Always
outside
put
world.
together. Always put
She's
together.
put together. She's married to a doctor,
Yes.
dentist,
Yeah.
doctor,
An orthopedic surgeon.
surgeon. Okay. And just has this, two house with a 2-car garage and the right number of children and the right number of pets. And the whole thing is just exactly the way it needs to be. And Fern, her sister, is a wreck.
She is.
She's a wreck. She looks a wreck. She walks around looking a wreck. She doesn't
She doesn't
remember to
care.
comb her hair.
She
She
doesn't
I
even cut her hair, it's
no,
like,
yeah. Yeah, she
doing
wears
that.
the same, 3 outfits
Yeah,
all the time, that kind of thing. And they're completely opposite. But as you're reading the book, you recognize that they're both a wreck on the inside.
yeah.
And I loved that juxtaposition there, that
Yeah,
you can't
yeah.
tell by looking.
No,
We talk about you can't judge a book by its cover.
right.
This is it in a nutshell, because when you first meet Leona, she's perfect.
Yes. And Fern thinks she's perfect. I mean, Fern
Yes.
is, Fern is like,
She
Leona's
falls for it.
coming
Yeah.
in, and Fern's worried about getting out the good china or finding
Right.
something that looks like good china, or
Finding 2 plates that match. Yeah.
finding 2 plates that match. I mean, she's like getting recipe, she just is a nervous wreck because Leona's coming. And so that, and then that the lunch scene was fun to write, because you kind of, Fern's kind of gritting her teeth, and their great aunt Belle, who is, her mind is drifting, and she's saying things that Fern doesn't really want her to say to Leon.
It's like,
Like, don't say that,
yeah.
and so that was kind of a fun scene to write. But it was also I won't give it away what happens, but
Yeah.
for Leona to have to move back into that home, the home place, the old house that's fallen down around them, and for her to have to be there, and is interesting, and and for her to find some comfort there.
Yeah,
you know,
when in her mind, it's the place that she's shunned,
yeah,
and
yeah,
yet to find comfort.
yes.
Right. When someone reads this book, what do you want them to walk away with?
I want them to walk away with the thought that we're not the worst thing we ever did. You're not the worst mistake you ever made. And I think the greatest thing, and, I didn't do all the bad stuff in this book, but, I've had my days.
Haven't we all, right?
I think back on that, and I think I'm glad in a way, because after you are in a position where you kind of messed up, you can't judge other people.
Yeah.
You really can't. And that's such a gift. I think that's a gift to live in a way that you give people a break, and and again, not the worst people.
Right, but generally speaking, we all go out there and we do things
Yeah,
that we think to
right.
ourselves, "Boy, if I could change that,
I would. Yeah,
I
but
would."
I think I want people to come away with, you get another chance. You just do. And I think, like, there's one scene in here where Fern looks out, she's in church, and she looks out and she realizes that those people have totally moved on.
They're
They're
not thinking about this thing that you did 20 years ago.
no, they're not
Right.
thinking about that at all. They're thinking about their own stuff.
I
So
think the other interesting thing is, you look out in a church like that and you recognize that every single one of those people has their own thing
yeah.
that they're hoping other people aren't looking at.
Yes. Yes.
There isn't one family in church who's actually as pious as they would want everyone to believe. We all have our things,
Right.
you know?
And there's one part of the book where I have a preacher, Roy,
Yeah.
and I think I have a preacher in there because I'd always kind of wanted to be a preacher. But anyway, so I have one as a character. But my friend from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, Corey Wells, I was in a writer's group with her, and she knew about what this book was about, and she'd read all of it. And I talking to her one day, she said, "Oh my God, my preacher said something that you've got to use in your book." And I'm like, okay. And
Please.
yeah, Corey told me about how her preacher would go into the empty church and sit in the pews where different people sat every Sunday. And he would go in the empty church, and he might sit like where Mr. Jones sits every
Yeah.
Sunday. he would sit there and he'd think about him and, just kind of say prayers and just kind of be with Mr. Jack. And I thought, oh my God, that is the greatest thing. So
I love that. Yeah.
I totally stole that and used it.
Well, no, see, and that's something really interesting is I think that as a writer, we do look at the world and say, oh, I could use that. I had a friend, so I'm writing a book right now that's very different than my others. It's not historical fiction. It's comedy. With comedy with a little side of romance. So it's not a romantic comedy. It's a comedy. The romance is like on the edge. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like it's almost the character. It isn't really the focus at all. But anyway, I have a friend who had to put her dogs in the bathroom because they were having floors redone.
Yeah.
And when they let the dogs out, one of the dogs had eaten a bar of soap.
Oh my God.
And started throwing up bubbles.
Oh God.
Okay. Well, I'm laughing. I'm in tears. The dog is fine. No dogs were harmed in this. No, he was not harmed. It wasn't, but he was like vomiting bubbles, foaming bubbles, right? And I thought, oh my gosh, that has to go in my book.
Oh, you do. Yeah, you have to use that.
That has to go in my book. Absolutely. Yeah. And my husband one time got angry at our Alexa.
Yeah.
And was trying to get Alexa to do something and Alexa wasn't. And he got angry and he unplugged it. And I said, and then he put it in timeout. Okay. So that is also in my book because I thought it was so funny. So those kinds of things. So yeah, I think that
it's being able to recognize those moments and
say that is funny or that is not, that is either funny or that is so poignant or that is exactly what I need my character to do.
Yes. And I don't know about you, but if I don't write it down.
Oh, I have a whole list of things.
Yeah. It's like paying attention and finding your pen.
And you're right.
It really is. I'm kind of in a drought right now. It's like I don't know. I'm editing, but I need to get my radar going again. The looking out and the hearing. I need to quiet the monkey mind so those first lines will come. But yeah, life is. There's so many funny things, and
there are, and you can just immediately see a character.
I love putting Alexa in timeout. I'm going to remember that. I don't know if I can do the one that put the one in the car in timeout, but that's the one that I'm usually arguing with.
So he unplugged it, and about 2 days later, he plugged her back in, and she was actually working better at that point. I think she just needed a reset. I think she needed a reset. I honestly think that things had gotten boggled in there, but he plugged her back in and asked her to do whatever. And she did. It was turn on some light or something. And he looked at me and said, see, it worked.
That's hilarious. That is so funny. Well, I'm excited about your new book.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. So speaking of new, what are you working on?
Carrie, I'm just in a drought. I just don't know. It's,
you brought up some stories that you said you're working on.
I've got stories. I've got about 14 short stories that I'd like to put together in a collection.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get a couple of those. I'm working on 2 of those. And I think what you said about, it just won't go. I think I'm trying to force something to happen. And it's not going to happen. And it was never going to happen. And so I've got to back off of that. And the other one I think is closer, but I hate not having something new. And I need to hear that voice. I need to quiet my mind so I can hear that, because the first of this story came to me. I was at a writer's thing in Kentucky about 1 million years ago. People say, how long did it take you to write this book? I'm like,
1 million
years.
Yeah.
But, that Dean came to me and his voice and because I was at a writer's thing, I wrote it down, and then worked on it. So I don't know. How do you do it? What do you have a schedule in your day, or what do you do?
So schedules don't work for me. I've tried them.
Yeah.
When I'm forced to sit and write because it's on my schedule, what
Yeah.
I write is usually crap,
Okay.
and then I'm not happy with it at all.
Yeah.
So I have to be in the mood. But I think it sounds to me like you have, the writer's block kind of thing. But what I tell people is I don't believe in writer's block as a
Right?
thing.
No, yeah.
I think what it usually means is there's something else on your mind.
Yeah.
And you either have to fix that, whatever that is. If it's fixable, go fix it so that you have more room,
Right.
right? Or find a way to package it up into a box
And say,
that
I'll
you can
come
that you
back.
can then move to the side and say, I'll deal with this while I'm dealing with it, and when I'm not dealing with it, it's in this box.
That would be a healthy thing to do. That would be, but
I just know that
you're
like
two
like when
different people in your brain.
yeah, yeah, like when my husband first got sick,
Uh,
um I couldn't write. There was no writing. I was all consumed with what was going on there.
oh yeah.
When I finally was able to like kind of wrap my head around like what does this mean for how our daily life is going to go and etc. Not that it went away,
Right.
but I was able to put it in a box that when I needed to, I could open it up and look at and deal with, etc. But then I could put the lid back on it. And as soon as I had it contained enough, all of a sudden my writing brain came back.
Okay. And that was a good thing because that helped you go back in a better way.
Yes. Yeah. And for me, it's like, so how do I get things in a box?
Yeah.
So either like if it's a problem that I know needs fixing and it has an obvious answer, you just sit about and you get that taken care of.
Yeah.
And if it isn't that, I do a little more of self-care stuff for me, like go walk on the beach and breathe.
Okay.
For me, water does it. So I'll walk along the beach, and I tell people on my walk down the beach, I'm storming. I'm walking, and my mind is just,
Yeah.
and by the time I get back, I'm walking, and I almost feel like I'm walking as part of the waves. Like I just have a whole different, and my mind has
The
slowed
rhythm.
down,
Yeah.
and I don't know. There's just I start breathing, and it just.
Okay.
And
That's
as soon
good.
as that starts happening, I have some of my best ideas walking on the beach. And I don't carry a notebook, so I speak into my phone,
Oh,
and
well,
then I get my notes, and I come home and I have usually you have to go back to what was I thinking about, because
yeah.
talk to text in the wind at the beach can be really funny when you read what it says, but at least it gives you a general idea of what you were
And you have
thinking
to
about.
think about it. I think
Yeah.
in transcribing it would bring more. Okay, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have finished this book if it hadn't been for the pandemic. I
Yeah.
mean, that was a terrible time in the world.
Right.
Personally, it was wonderful. It was like
It
it.
forced you to stop doing everything else.
Yes, and you couldn't think about doing this. You couldn't think
Right.
about doing that. So it's
Right.
like I really think, and I don't think I think I could maybe do something without a new pandemic. So that's maybe I just need to
Please.
I need to pretend there's a pandemic.
I think you just need to like give yourself more space.
I think
Just
so. Yeah.
you can't be creative when your life is too full.
No, you cannot.
You
And then
just
it's like embarrassing because people are like, "Oh, do you want to do this?" And you're like, "No."
I really don't. No, leave me alone and let me just breathe
Yeah,
for a little
I
while.
said these
Yeah.
words not too long ago, and then I felt really guilty about
The
saying
other thing that really works for me is I have trouble sometimes writing at home
it. Okay.
because the dog needs to go out,
Oh,
or
God,
the
yeah.
laundry needs to be done, or my husband, needs something at the moment,
Yes.
or oh, dinner, I forgot to put dinner on. So I
Yeah.
like to go to a retreat where I get away a week or two where I have nothing to do. And I've
Yeah.
created my own retreats. Like I'll go and get an Airbnb somewhere and
Wow.
just
Yeah.
go away to write.
Yeah.
Well,
You think,
and
well, I don't have any children here.
no,
Minutes
no, there's
is
something about it being your home that you know that you are the one in charge of.
yes.
And there are, and even though the children aren't home, your husband's home,
Yeah.
and he does expect things like
Like
for you to
food.
like food and shower, those kinds of things. There's certain. But you could go to a writer's retreat. Like I said, get an Airbnb. It doesn't even have to be far from home, just far
Yeah.
enough away that no one's going to come knocking on your door. And as soon as I arrive, I'm ready to write. My mind is just like, whoa, we can go now.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
And then I just write and write and write. I don't worry about anybody but me. So
Right.
food only happens when I
Yeah.
am hungry. And I go to the grocery store on day one and I buy really easy, something quick that I enjoy, that I can make real fast for one, or that makes it for 4 and I eat it for 4 days because who cares?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And you don't care about any of that. And you get up in the morning when you're ready, and you go to bed at night when you're ready.
And the
And you
story
eat.
stays in your head.
Yes.
Getting.
Yeah. And I can get so much accomplished in that amount of time, and it just works better for me. So that might be something else to
That's
consider.
very helpful.
Yeah.
And I'm not happy not writing.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I recommend.
Thank
Anyway.
you.
So Patti, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Well, they can call or they can write.
And smoke signals. No, do you have a website out there?
I do have a website. I did it myself. It's a do-it-yourself website, so don't be expecting much. But it's pattimeredith.com.
Super.
That was kind of a strange thing to do too. That was it, but I enjoyed doing it. But yeah, I think the email's on there, and I'm very available.
Super. So everyone run right out.
Yeah, just come on over.
Come on over. Head on. Let's give them your address. Don't just drive on in. Say hello to Patti.
I will say that book clubs aren't they the best?
They are.
Oh my God. Is there anything better? This sounds so narcissistic or whatever that word is. But to sit there and have people talk about your people like they're real, like they're neighbors.
I had a woman say, oh, there was this one part. Can I read it? And she read like these 2 sentences and then put the book up to her chest. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm being quoted.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there is something really amazing about book clubs.
Right.
So Patti loves them. If you've read South of Heaven and would like for Patti to come to your book club, reach out to her. Have you ever done a Zoom book club?
Oh yeah, I like that.
Yes. So see, she can. So wherever you are in the United States or the world, reach out to Patti. The other thing I want to recommend to everyone is, if you've read South of Heaven, to go onto Amazon and review it. Those reviews are really key to helping our books take off. It's a difficult thing.
You are such a good reviewer. I swear I'd rather write another novel than write a book review.
Well, so, and this is the thing. I think a lot of people say on Amazon, oh, I don't know what to write. Yeah. I want to really quickly say, if you're going to write something on Amazon, you do not have to be a book reviewer to do it. You can write good book as the title, and you can write
like, oh my God, that will make our day.
You can write, I enjoyed it.
3 words. Yeah, just good book.
I enjoyed it. Good book. It doesn't have, we're not asking for, something like your English teacher made you write in the 9th grade, right? So absolutely. Well, Patti,
I should say, I will write for reviews. It's like,
we should stand out on the. All right. Well, Patti,
I enjoyed this so much. Thank you.
So did I. And thank you for being with me today. Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.